Hello and a long welcome to you from Minnesota here in the frozen tundra of the United States. We are here seated on a Wednesday about 2:30 p.m. in the afternoon here in close to 9:30 or after 9:30 in Europe, there in Belgium where Jörg is at, and we're going to do another reading of the divine program of the world. The great Exodus, or the time of the end. How near are we to it? And we are on the chapter, the apocalypse or unveiling. And we had gone through a very intense portion of the chapter in our previous recording, Jörg, and it's been more than a few days. So I want to welcome you, Jörg, and thank you for taking the time with me to go through this intriguing, interesting, and very revealing book of James Aiken Wylie.
Yes, thank you, Brett. I'm glad that I have the opportunity to be with you together again and continue this reading of this wonderful, I like to call it unlisted book, because in the works of James Aiken Wylie, nobody ever mentions easily the book of the Great Exodus. And when you Google it, it is very hard to find, and by the hand of God, you found it. You scanned it and you provided it for us on your archive.org library to read, and then we decided we were going to read it, even though we both have very, very, very busy agendas. And sometimes I have the time to read a few pages in advance. Like last time I had the possibility to read about 12 pages in advance, and that were just the 12 pages we read in the last reading, which still I am under the impression of that reading. Under the impression that's a wrong way to say it, because that's a German expression to use it. That means that I'm still impressed by the reading that we did, because it was really very passionate and very with very deep feelings mingled. I even cried during the reading, something I can remember I ever did before. And that's just because the writing really went so to my heart, and I hope it went to yours also. I mean, I don't mean Brett only, I also mean the people who are watching this video, of course. And I'm glad that we have the opportunity now in this time of the year where you have to work a little bit less, so that we could schedule this reading tonight. I have been working for 11 hours as a cab driver today, and I have to say I'm quite tired. And the point is not that I'm tired, the point is also that I have to work tomorrow at 6:30 again. So we have now 9:30 already, and at 6:15 I have to get up again and do again 11 hours. But I just didn't have the time to prepare anything of the reading today, so I hope that I will do justice to this wonderful book and to the wonderful subject that we are in, because as you remember from last reading, it was very passionate and it was very intense, and but I read it on beforehand, and I didn't read it on beforehand today, so I hope that I can be in the same spirit as I was last time and lead you in the same spirit while reading this book. And without any further ado, I'd say, okay, then let's start. We are on page 238 in the book, that is in the scanned PDF on page 239. And we ended with this sentence that I'm going to continue now in the 26th reading of the book today. Yet another epoch arises in the psalm. This time, let me just change the photo here that you don't see me all the time. It's about the book here we are reading. Yet another epoch rises in the psalm. This time it is Christ the King who appears before us. He had already come forth as a prophet, yet next unveiled his glory as a priest, and now, last of all, he stands before us in royal majesty as a king. This consummates the unveiling. He is seen by the church, by the world, and by the universe as prophet, priest, and king. Now he is glorified with that glory which he had with the Father before the world was. His title is won upon the battlefield. The Lord at thy right hand shall strike through kings in the day of his wrath. The church, in the person of David, had been speaking all throughout the psalm. She is still speaking. And in this verse she celebrates, in the hearing of God the Father, the exploits to be performed by God the Son, who sits at his right hand. He shall strike through kings. Now, what kings are we talking about? The 10 kings who had made war with the saints. This psalm looks back upon the second psalm, where the kings of the earth are seen setting themselves against the Lord and against his anointed. Speaking of a conspiracy, quote-unquote theory, right? It is no theory, it stands in the Bible. The kings of the earth were setting themselves against the Lord and against his anointed. Read Psalm 2. It's in there. That is not the first time, but that is one of the mentioning of conspiracies in the Bible. Of course, you have the conspiracy of Satan, the fallen angel Lucifer, with the angels that he took with him out of heaven. That is another conspiracy against God. And he uses all the gullible people in this world. Yeah? So this psalm looks back upon the second psalm, where the kings of the earth are seen setting themselves against the Lord and against his anointed. And it looks forward to the apocalypse, where the kings of the papal earth are of one mind to give their power to the beast in his persecution of the saints. When shall the sun strike through these kings? In the day of his wrath, we are here told. This day is the same with the great day so often foretold by the prophets. It is the day of the wrath of the Lamb, the day of which the kings had been warned in the second psalm. This is none other than that great conflict with the anti-Christian powers, which John symbolically exhibits in the closing page of the Apocalypse as preceding the millennium. Quote, "He will judge among the nations. He has filled them with corpses. He has smitten the head over much land, or over the wide earth." Unquote. This is again the translation from Professor Alexander Princeton. I don't like it. This is not the King James, but I advise you all to put the King James next to this book when reading it for yourself or opening it while we are reading it, because I haven't opened now the King James in this pass. This is about this is from the Revelation. He doesn't even say what verse, what chapter or verse that is, but I think that is from the Apocalypse, so from the Revelation here. Yeah? But it is not from the King James. Now the first clause certainly implies the idea of a judgment day, the setting of the great throne, the inquisition for blood, for exposure of evil both in its principles and in its acts. That vengeance is notified by one brief but terrific phrase, quote, "He shall fill the places with the dead bodies." This terrible slaughter is undoubtedly the same to which the prophets point in almost these very words, and the same with that unexampled carnage which the Apocalypse reveals. For by fire, and this is from Isaiah chapter 16, verse 16, I guess. For by fire and by his sword will the Lord plead with all flesh, and the slain of the Lord shall be many. Unquote. This is the, quote, sacrifice in Bozrah and the great sacrifice in the land of Idumea, unquote, which is to make the sword of the Lord fat, and to fill the mountains of the mystic Edom with his slain men, as we read in Isaiah 34 and Ezekiel 35. This too is the same battlefield on which John saw the beast, and the beast, this is the same battlefield on which John saw the beast and the kings of the earth and their armies gathered together to make war against him that sat on the horse and against his army, and which, after the conflict, exhibited the spectacle of a field drowned in blood. even unto the horses' bridles by the space of 1,600 furlongs, as we read in Revelation chapter 14 and 19. He shall wound the head over many countries, or he has smitten the head over the wide earth. The head there is not collective. It indicates not many rulers, but one great ruler. The clause foretells a yet deeper stroke on the hostile interest than even that of the overthrow of the kings. It predicts a mortal blow to the supreme potentate and ruling head over these kings. It is Antichrist himself that now falls, the beast with the 7 heads and 10 horns. Nay, it is a deeper stroke still. It smites the devil, who was the animating soul of the beast from the abyss. We read this in Revelation chapter 13, that the beast was given great power and authority by the devil. Go into Revelation 13 to understand this. So this is where James Edwin Wylie, of course, takes this from. This is a deeper stroke still. It smites the devil, who was the animating soul of the beast from the abyss. The passage looks back on paradise, where the sentence was passed upon the serpent. He shall bruise thy head. And it looks forward to the apocalypse, where we hold the prediction fulfilled in the casting of the beast and the false prophet, vanquished on the last great battlefield, into a lake of fire burning with brimstone, and the binding of the old serpent, which is the devil and Satan, with a great chain. Having smitten the head of the great confederacy, and so consummated his victory, the conqueror stoops to drink, and refreshed thereby lifts up the head. The action is plain, but no expositor has clearly shown us its significance. Rivet, in his learned and judicious commentary on the prophetical psalms, thinks that Christ is here viewed in his humbled estate, and that the brook of which he drank denotes his sufferings. In a footnote he takes this from Andre Rivetti, Commentarius in Psalmos, means that is Latin commentaries in Psalms, on prophetic Psalms, on pages 480 to 482. So this is just the source that James Edwin Wylie gives out here, where he has this mentioning from. The ordinary expositors following him accordingly make the brook the cup of the course. Calvin's exposition is more natural, but still not free from objection. It is to the effect that Christ, pursuing his foes and hastening to deal the decisive blow, stoops momentarily to drink of the brook in his path and resumes his victorious career. But at the stage of the drama at which this action is placed, this battle is ended, and the leader and prince of the hostile armies had been laid down. The reference must be to some event occurring at the close of the great conflict, and which visibly contributes to the final triumph. We are disposed to think it can refer only to the effusion of the Spirit after the fall of Antichrist and immediately before the millennium. The influences of the Spirit are often likened to a stream or a river, and the breaking out of these streams is foretold to happen after the day of vengeance and the year of the redeemed. I will open rivers in high places and fountains in the midst of the valleys, said God by Isaiah. And let us mark how the brook in this verse stands contrasted with the dew of verse 3. The one was a Pentecostal era, when the first drops of the Spirit fell. The other is that copious shower, that river of divine influence, which is to water the church in the latter day. And let us also mark the harmony of this idea with the apocalyptic drama. It is after the overthrow of Babylon and the binding of the real author of all the opposition that John sees the river of the water of life proceeding out of the throne of God and of the Lamb. The only objection that can be taken to this interpretation is that it is Christ who drinks and is refreshed, and not his church. But we must remember that the triumph of the church is Christ's triumph, and that, in the words of Rivet, the church is the mystical body of Christ in which the Messiah suffers and fights. And, we may add, not only suffers and fights, but also triumphs. Christ mystical refreshed by this brook will lift up the head. So much for what we take to be the right interpretation of this remarkable psalm. It stands among the messianic odes as Tabor among the mountains. It has a comprehensive perspicuity. Yeah, what does that mean, brother?
That's a good question. Perspective, I don't know. I'll look it up. I'm looking it up.
It has a comprehensive perspicuity and a concentrated glory which are all its own. Rival it has none. And we do not wonder to find it honored above all the other psalms by the special notice of our Lord and his apostles. It is a glass in which we can trace the whole history of the gospel church, the whole conflicts, conquests, and glory of her King. It enables us to look all the way from the Mount of Olives, last touched by the foot of the ascending Redeemer, to the banks of that river, clear as crystal, which is seen in the new paradise, going forth to reclothe the earth with fertility and beauty.
Yes, Jörg, it's really interesting when we run into these words like perspicuity, because who uses perspicuity anymore, Jörg?
Not so many people, I guess.
I don't think I've ever heard it. What it really means, it has both a physical and a spiritual meaning. The physical meaning is transparency or clearness, the quality of a substance which renders objects visible through it. And then the spiritual meaning, or the second meaning, is clearness to mental vision, easiness to be understood, freedom from obscurity and ambiguity, the quality of writing or language which readily presents to mind of another the precise ideas of the author.
So it is in a way related to the word perspective.
Yeah, it's of the same root, right?
Mm-hmm.
But
yeah.
Much more interesting.
Yeah, this is something that you have with the Old English that nobody wants to speak anymore, like the English of the King James Bible, because they say, oh, that's old, we don't need that anymore, and they don't have an understanding that in these words...
It's a lie straight out of the pit of hell. We're living in the pit of hell.
Yeah, you find the richness of the language in these old words.
Yeah,
and
you
that
do.
goes for English as it goes for German or
we've
Dutch
lost
too,
so much in this world.
Yeah, we did. Yeah, it puts a little different perspective on the sentence when you understand the word perspicuity.
That's right.
Yeah. So, after reading this, the author ends with a footnote, and that is the end of this chapter. So, we are going into reading the footnote that James Atkin Wylie adds here. The author may be... sorry.
Frog in the throat. Yeah, I get those too.
The author may be permitted to say that this exposition of this psalm, he humbly thinks, may remove not a little obscurity which has hitherto rested upon it. It presents it as a consecutive drama full of significance. The author, speaking of James Atkin Wylie, is also satisfied that almost all the Messianic psalms are arranged in dramatic order, and that an exposition of them as to this principle would evolve with wonderful clearness their gospel meaning and enable Christians fully to enter this quote-unquote chamber of holy voices. He has often marked with pain how totally many Christians misconceive the scope and the spirit of the Psalms. Why, say they, why should we continue to sing the deliverances and victories of the Old Testament? Give us psalms celebrating the events of the gospel dispensation. The psalms do celebrate the events of the gospel dispensation. Nay, more, they are almost entirely taken up with these events, many of them yet unfulfilled. The psalms celebrate the events passing over the church at this hour and are as suitable to be sung by Christians as if they had been written in this 19th century. Very interesting footnote the author ends on. And then he goes into chapter 4, the type and the antitype, or the first and second Egypts. This is going to be interesting, because Egypt is so predominant in Freemasonry, you know?
Oh, okay. Yeah, that's right, Jörg. Mystery religion.
Mystery religion, yeah. So let's start reading this. The type and the antitype, or the first and second Egypts. When we open the first pages of the Bible, we find ourselves in the valley of the Nile. The mighty river, rolling onward with bounteous flood, waters the land and creates a garden where, but for it, the sun would look down upon burning sands. On either hand lie fields of the richest fruitage, and aloft, above the various products of the valley, the palm uprears its stem and displays its graceful crown. Man, too, strives to cover the soil with the mementos of his industry and the trophies of his skill. Already has he taught the tall obelisk to rise to heaven with its mysterious scroll charged with the secrets of these early days. Here the pyramid displays its severe grandeur and rivals in mountainous bulk the everlasting hills. Nor are temples a-wanting, whose cyclopean wall and ponderous roof form the colossal shrine of some puny divinity. And here are proud cities, their streets trodden by busy throngs, while sentinels keep watch on their ramparts, and marshalled hosts are seen to issue from their brazen gates. With these evidences before us, it needs no one to tell us that the nation occupying the valley of the Nile has already grown to greatness in arts and arms. Egypt has said to herself, I sit a queen and shall be the world's head to all generations. Isn't this taken from Revelation, where the whore of Babylon says, I sit a queen? And I just can't finish the sentence, but I think it is in Revelation.
Ah, yeah, that could be.
When you do a word search in the
I can try that, Jörg.
I sit a queen. Yeah, I thought that was in Revelation. Would be interesting if you can find that and add that to our script here. Yeah. Egypt had said to herself, I sit a queen and shall be the world's head to all generations.
Bingo, Jörg. Revelation 18:7.
Yeah, and it reads,
How much she hath glorified herself, and lived deliciously, so much torment and sorrow give her. For she saith in her heart, I sit a queen, and am no widow, and shall see no sorrow.
That's it, and am no widow, yeah. That's the point that I was making. Thank you, Brett, for looking this up. Yeah,
my pleasure.
This is Revelation 18, it was, or 17?
18:7, yes.
18:7, yeah. So this is about the judgment of the whore of Babylon, huh? Because Revelation 17 and 18 are over the judgment and the fall of Babylon. And we are speaking not of the Babylon of the Old Testament, we are speaking of Babylon in total. Because Babylon, as Nebuchadnezzar already more or less wanted to predict as a golden statue, is actually the kingdom that rules them all. Babylon actually never died. It always transported itself, and it took on another mask. It went from Babylon to Medo-Persia to Greece, and now it went to Rome. And Rome is Babylon. And Alexander Hislop knows this, the Bible knows this, anybody who studies history and the Bible knows this, that the whore that sits in Rome on the seven hills is modern Babylon. And there in Revelation chapter 17 and surely chapter 18, we read the judgment of that Babylon, where she says, the woman that is arrayed in purple and scarlet with a golden cup in her hand that is full with the abominations of the earth, and says, I sit a queen and I shall be no widow. So here James Atkin Wylie uses this same expression, and that's why I fell on it. Egypt has said to herself, and Egypt is Babylon, remind you. There's no difference. Those are two Babylons, you know, Babylon and Egypt. I think you can say it that way.
Yep.
Egypt has said to herself, I sit a queen and shall be the world's head to all generations. And where, it may be asked, could empire have found a securer home? With the Nile bringing plenty year by year on its spreading wave, and the great desert stretching its arms like a rampart around Egypt on every side, how impossible is it that here power should ever fall from its throne? The Egyptians have builded for all time. That's why we still see the pyramids today, right?
Mm-hmm.
Works so colossal are meant to see the close as they have witnessed the dawn of history. How evident is it that the Egyptians have reckoned on long as they have enjoyed an early tenure of empire. In truth, the sources of Egypt's greatness seemed as stable and unalterable as nature itself. What power would dry up the Nile? And while their river continued to flow and the sun to shine, how impossible that the harvest of that land should come to an end. Other cities might be stripped of their bulwarks. How impossible that Egypt could ever be reft of hers. Was not her wall the desert? Was not her defense impregnable? Her knowledge had lit its lamp, and here it should continue to burn to all time. Enriched with plenty, crowned with peace, embellished by art, and guided by wisdom, what shall hinder Egypt being a lady of kingdoms forever? But hark! What cry is this that strikes upon our ear? It comes from the brick kilns, a foreign race, held in slavery by their Egyptian lords, here perform their daily tasks under terror of the rod. How crushing their burdens! How mercilessly their rulers smite them! Not a jot of their appointed tasks will their oppressors abate. Every new day brings heavier burdens. Every hour sees an increase to her bondage, and from that bondage there is no escape but through the tomb. The labors of these unhappy slaves are at once the source of Egypt's splendor and the cause of her approaching downfall. The proud monuments and the great cities that beautify the land, the boast of the Egyptian and the administration of the stranger, what are they but the double witness of the wrongs of the Israelites and the tyranny of the Egyptians? The cup of the one's suffering and of the other's iniquity has long been filling up. The great avenger has now pronounced it to be full. I have heard the groanings of my people which are in Egypt, and I am come down to deliver them. But in what quarter will deliverance rise, and what form will it assume? Will it come with observation? Will its advent be heralded by signs in the heavens and by wonders on the earth? Let us turn our eyes to yonder desert on the east of Egypt. Lo, there comes a man, his face turned towards that land where tears how copious
flow.
where tears
Yes.
flow copious as the Nile, and where groans ascended unceasingly to heaven. But is this he? Is this the deliverer? He carries neither bow nor sword. He has no army at his back. He comes onward, staff in hand, like an ordinary pilgrim, and in his unwarlike fashion advances against the martial chivalry of Egypt. Ah, there seems little here to awaken hope in the bosom of the captive, little to create alarm in the breast of Pharaoh. He comes nearer. And now we recognize in this mysterious visitor the very man who had been chased from Egypt 40 years ago, and who had lived since that day as a shepherd amid the hills of the Midian. We see him enter Egypt, and we see him stand before Pharaoh. And now we hear him open his great commission. Thus saith the Lord God, let my people Israel go, that they may serve me. How startling! My people! We hear the monarch exclaim, have not the Israelites for generations been the property of the crown? Manumit, the Hebrew slaves, stop all the great works in Egypt, derange the whole economy of the nation, tolerate the very worship of Jehovah in the land of Osiris, and crown all by sacrificing the gods of Egypt before the face of the Egyptians. The frown mounts on the monarch's brow, and the demand of Moses is promptly and sternly met by the refusal. What is the Lord that I should met by the refusal? Who is the Lord that I should? Sorry, I missed I missed a row here. I'm very sorry. The frown mounts on the monarch's brow, and the demand of Moses is promptly and sternly met by the refusal. Who is the Lord that I should obey his voice to let Israel go? I know not the Lord, neither will I let Israel go. Thus the king of Egypt throws down the gauntlet to the king of heaven, and the great controversy begins. We become the awestruck spectators of that controversy, as justice urges its demand, and power meets it with arrogant refusal. And the contest proceeds amid the thunderings and lightnings of Jehovah's wrath to the tragic terrors of its close. Suffice it to remark that the gates which the power of the king keeps closed, the earthquake judgments of God fling open, and the Hebrew captives march out over the ruins of the once great and flourishing kingdom of Egypt. So far, this drama. Now, what is its interpretation? Is the drama acted and over, and, like the kingdom, where the scene was originally laid, has it passed away? And is it never more to be seen on earth? No. This, which we have been contemplating, is but the shadow. The great reality yet awaits the world. Egypt was but a symbol. That's why they used hieroglyphs, maybe. Symbol in writings, you know?
You betcha.
Egypt was just a symbol. A glass into which, if we steadfastly look, we shall see a greater tragedy enacting. The men of the first ages beheld the type. We see the events themselves. They saw the image and likeness of the future, though at the distance of 4,000 years. We see the future itself. This forms a link of no ordinary interest between the first and the last ages of history, between the first and the last tragedies of the Bible. Let us make Egypt the glass in which to contemplate the great drama of the apocalypse. Now, when we do so, we find that the literal scene and the literal actors are changed, but in all essential particulars the drama is the same. Earthly power and heavenly authority are still in conflict. I guess we feel that every day today, right?
That's right.
It is the old battle not yet fought out. We look into the glass, but it is not now the valley of the Nile with its pyramids and its temples that rise before us. No, it's Europe with its 10 kingdoms and its white Alps. White, alas! Not with their snows only, but with the bones of martyrs. Remember the Huguenots. Remember the Waldenses. It is not now the Pharaoh of Egypt, but the Pharaoh of the 7 hills, who throws down the gauntlet and bids defiance to the messenger, who addresses him in the name of Jehovah. Let my people go. Now this is a vaster prison than the early one. This is a longer captivity than the first, and bitterer too. By 1,000 times is the bondage which has here been endured. Not a foot-breadth of the soil of her vast prison is there which the church has not watered with her tears and moistened with her blood. We look over Europe from north to south, from the calm waters of the Adriatic to the billowy Atlantic. And everywhere, if we accept our own country, we see the church in bondage. Our own country, he speaks of course here of England in the time. Everywhere we see the truth suppressed. We see it made a crime to read the Word of God or even to possess a Bible. We see it declared a crime to worship God through the one mediator or to profess belief in the great cardinal doctrine of the New Testament that faith alone in the sacrifice of Christ justifies and saves the sinner. We see these things punished with banishment, with confiscation of goods, with imprisonment, and not unfrequently with death. Death accompanied with horrible torments. Think of the Inquisition. We look back into history and find that this bondage has been prolonged for upwards of 12 centuries. Unspeakably gloomy is the whole vista, onward even to the first ages. Edicts of proscription, blazing fires in which the witnesses of Jesus are tormented, scaffolds flooded with the blood of martyrs, and a great cry from beneath the altar, "How long?" Such are the spectacles that meet our eye when we turn it upon the past of Europe. Is not this the real Egypt? Let us look again into the glass and mark the second stage of this great drama. The same Moses who had fled Egypt returns at the end of 40 years and demands liberty in behalf of the Hebrew captives in the name of Jehovah. "And I say unto thee," such are his words before Pharaoh, "and I say unto thee, let my son go, that he may serve me. And if thou refuse to let him go, behold, I will slay thy son, even thy firstborn." The same demand has been addressed to the triple-crowned king of the 7 hills. That demand has been made less formally, but not less really. God has sent his message, not by the hands of a prophet or of an angel, but, in accordance with the principle we have explained in the previous chapter, by the instrumentality of one of those mighty dispensations which he now makes the ministers of his will. The Reformation was the Moses whom God sent to papal Europe in the 16th century. The Reformation was just primitive Christianity returned. That Christianity which was the child of a Hebrew mother, which had been in danger of perishing, like Moses, by the edicts of persecuting emperors, which had been received temporarily into the protection of the empire, but afterwards had been driven out and found a refuge among the shepherds of the Alps. That Christianity which had fled to the wilderness in the 6th century returns in the 16th. It addresses all papal Europe through the Reformation. And what is its demand? Liberty for the Church of God, the abolition of all restrictions on freedom of conscience and freedom of worship. Let my people go that they may serve me. We can see the messenger crossing the Alps as Moses the desert. He carries neither buckler nor shield. There is no mustering of hosts behind him. We see him walking along the highway to the seven-hilled city. His steps are on the marble threshold of the Vatican. He stands in the presence of the modern Pharaoh and thus addresses him, I come from that God whose prophets you have slain and whose altars you have cast down. Thus saith the Lord, Israel is my son, my firstborn. Let my son go, that he may serve me. And if thou refuse to let him go, behold, I will slay thy son, even thy firstborn. On the answer to be returned hangs the fate of papal Europe. The alternative to the second, as to the first Egypt, is submission and safety, disobedience and ruin. Now let us look a third time into the glass and observe the next stage of this drama. Pharaoh rejects the message, and not only does he deny to the people liberty, but he proceeds to make a grievous addition to their burdens. And Pharaoh commanded the same day the taskmaster of the people and their officers, saying, Ye shall no more give the people straw to make brick as heretofore. Let them go gather straw for themselves. And the tale of the bricks which they did make heretofore ye shall lay upon them. Ye shall not diminish aught thereof, for they be idle. Therefore they cry, saying, Let us go and sacrifice to our God. Let their more work be laid upon the men, that they may labor therein, and let them not regard vain words, as we read in Exodus verses 6 through 9. I don't know the chapter here.
Oh, chapter 5, Yerk, I think it is.
Oh, yes, yeah, right. The Roman 5.
Yeah, it's
chapter.
amazing how that is. You know, I always looked at that too, thinking, what?
Yeah, I read over
right.
that. Okay, so yeah. Exodus chapter 5, verses 6 through 9. From Egypt, let us turn to papal Europe, gazing into the glass, right? We have seen the messenger God sent in the 16th century. We have heard the demand of that messenger. What was the reply? Did the Pharaoh of the Seven Hills proclaim liberty to the church? I'd like to say, Brett, when I read this, what was the reply? I'd like to say the reply was the Council of Trent.
Oh, wow, yeah. Good point.
Did the Pharaoh of the Seven Hills proclaim liberty to the church? Did he open the gates of his house of bondage? Nay. Rather, did he not that very hour issue orders to all his taskmasters, to every prince and every inquisitor, to increase the burdens of the people? He had chastised his captives with whips. Now he began to chastise them with scorpions. Rome had been a murderer from the beginning, like the devil, the father of lies, who never speaks a lie because the truth is not in him. He has been a murderer from the beginning, right?
Right.
Rome had been a murderer from the beginning too, because Rome got his power from the devil. Already had she burned the bones of Wycliffe and planted the stake for Jan Hus. Already had she embrued her hands in the blood of the Waldenses and of the Bohemians. But her more appalling persecutions, her more awful tragedies, were those which she committed after the Reformation. The demand the Reformation addressed to her irritated her, and, frenzied with fear and rage, she began a wholesale slaughter of the saints of God. Yes, Rome gave her answer to the demand of Jehovah, "Let my people go," when she built the Inquisition. She gave her answer when she planned and executed the St. Bartholomew Massacre, 1572. She gave her answer when she covered Spain with auto da fe, France with dragonades, England with fires, and the Low Countries with gibbets and corpses. Rome gave her answer when she wrote in her statute book that decree of blood which stands unrepealed to this hour, and which enacts that heretics and heresy are to be purged out by burning. It's a shame I have to add here to the summation that the author gives about Spain, France, England, and the Low Countries. I have to add Germany, that suffered very, very deeply in the 30-Year War between 1680 and 1648, where almost half of the German population was killed in this war. I don't know why the author doesn't include that, but I think that is very important for us that we understand it, that we should also at least mention the 30-Year War that was fought on German soil, like so many wars were fought on German soil, something you Americans never ever experienced up to today, that there's a war fought on your home soil. Anyway, Rome gave her answer when she wrote in her statute book that decree of blood which stands unrepealed to this hour, and which enacts that heretics and heresy are to be purged out by burning. Let us look into the glass once more. The drama now begins to draw towards its final and more terrible stages. Moses has gone forth from the presence of Pharaoh. But though the monarch has yielded no compliance, the doom threatened did not immediately descend. Space was given for repentance. But when it was seen, in the continued and aggravated bondage of the people, that Pharaoh was fully purposed to defy God and oppress Israel, Moses was commanded to stretch out his rod towards heaven, and then began the plagues by which Egypt was smitten. After the demand of the Reformation had been addressed to Rome, space was given her for repentance. God waited for her a full 200 years. And how were these years spent on the part of the apostate church? The world was shaken with wars and reddened with blood from the efforts of Rome to suppress the Reformation. The years of grace ran out. The period of waiting came at length to an end. The rod was stretched out towards heaven, and quickly came an era of judgment, whose plague were of a character and on a scale which no former age had witnessed. Already the image of that judgment had been seen. For what were the 10 plagues of Egypt but types of the yet greater plagues which were to pass in terror over the papal earth? We are now invited to contemplate the great Exodus, the final outgoing of the church. This is the day of which all the prophets from Isaiah to Malachi have spoken. Drama unprecedentedly terrible and sublime. It is not now a single kingdom, but a world which is to pass away, with its thrones and hierarchies, its institutions and laws, its civilization and arts. As the sun of its last day rises, it is seen apparently as strong as ever. Its riches, its armies, its political power are all undiminished. But suddenly its stability departs. Law and order are no more. The hailstones of war smite its earth. The blood of conflict reddens its seas and dyes its rivers. The stars of its political firmament are shaken and fall, and along its darkened heavens the awful voice of nations in revolution is heard to roll. The last awful and nameless plague consummates its ruin, and now it lies as fearful wreck, a scene of perished splendor. It is through the midst of these tremendous judgments that the Church is to find a path to the land of her rest. And here we finish chapter 4 and go next time, very timely and precisely in time after about an hour of reading, into chapter 5, the coming of the Ancient of Days. And this will of course be part of our next reading, the 27th of this book, The Great Exodus, and we hope of course that Michael will join us in the next reading. But I would like to give the word now to Brother Brett, who is today luckily in the position that he is a little bit more awake than when we do the sessions in the morning at his time, that he probably can give us a little overview of what we just read and a little bit of his own understanding and explanation to finish the video here. So, please, Brother Brett, I'm eager to hear your comments.
Well, I don't know about the listeners, but I got goosebumps from that. That was incredible. Yeah. And you were crying last session, and I almost started crying now. That is powerful. That is powerful. Now, finally, we get an idea of what this book is about.
Yeah. We see Egypt repeated before our eyes. Things that happened 3,500 years ago are being repeated before our eyes. History repeats itself.
I'm just shaking my head. No wonder this book has been just completely ignored.
Yeah, I think there's a reason that you won't find it easily, brother.
Yeah. Isn't that something? Yeah, I just can't comment anymore. I think we should just wish everyone all the best in this new year that the Antichrist has shoved down our throat in the middle of winter. I mean, wow. Yerk and I have talked about this for a while, how Papal Europe just thinks to change times and laws over and over and over again. And, you know, what a shame. What a shame. And we're forced to be dealt with these traditions of men and these papal thunders from the Whore of Babylon. And we just obey them. Like, oh, it's our duty, it's our civil duty to obey the papal orders. Like it's the thundering of the voice of heaven. Yeah, nothing could be further than the truth, right, Yerk?
Exactly.
Yeah. So, on that note, Yerk, I'm done too. Let's look forward to next time. Looking forward to seeing everyone then. God bless, and we'll catch up with you then. Bye-bye.